What's that? Listening. Letting go. I presume she knows what she's talking about, but... Hi, James from engVid. This lesson goes out to Jen from Tennessee. She asked about the difference between presume and assume. And today we're going to work on it. Thanks, Jen, because as a... actually, I like to think of myself as someone who likes to read a lot and has a pretty good handle. Handle means like control of or knowledge of English. I was just surprised when I was working with assume and presume how similar they are and the differences. So let me help you today. All right, guys, let's go to the board. Presume or assume. Even a lot of native speakers make a mistake when using it. Actually, I'm kind of lying because they just generally use assume and don't bother with presume. It's only usually used for formal occasions. But what does assume mean? Well, let's look at the word. Mr. E, assume the position. As you can see, he has his arms and legs spread out. If you've ever done this before, boys and girls, you need to go home early and you need a spanking. Your parents should raise you better. That means to bring you up better because you're a bad person. To assume, to take up. Really, we mean to take, which means to go, or to start. If he assumed responsibility at the company, it means he started responsibility. He started to do something, or she started, right? They assumed control. They took control at that time and started to be in control from then on. Next, position. That's a position. Now, sometimes people say assume the position in baseball. You're going to get down and get the bat ready. Assume the position. If you're going to jail, assume the position. There's other positions you can assume, but that's for another time. Okay? So that's what we mean by assume. And I should have explained to start from. Assume. Means away from evidence. Usually when we assume something, we don't have evidence. We think it's true. That's it. We just believe or think. We have nothing to show us it's true. I assume the sun will come up tomorrow. I have no proof or evidence. I just think so. Okay? So that leads us to this one. Believe and expect. We just believe it, so we expect something to happen. It doesn't mean there's a reason for it to happen. It's just my belief and expectations. Okay? So I believe I will be here tomorrow because, well, I'm here today. No proof, but I'm hoping it'll be true tomorrow, okay? Another one for assume is pretend. She assumed the dead woman's identity. All right? She pretended to be the dead woman. It kind of comes with start. You start something, but with pretend, you continue to do it. So when somebody assumes someone's identity, they take it on. So Superman and Clark Kent. He assumed the identity of Clark Kent because he's Superman really, and he pretends to be Clark Kent. Cool? Another one, think. Sometimes people will say, let's assume this is true. And they mean let's pretend so we can think about it. Let's assume we're all rich millionaires living in Brazil right now and we're having champagne. All right? We're not because we're watching this video. But let's assume. Let's think or pretend. Okay? Because there's no evidence to say anything opposite, we can just assume anything. And that's why it's used in more informal English and used more regularly by English speakers. Presume, though. Presume has a different meaning. But just before we get there, let's look at assume as a verb, right? Assume, assuming. As a noun, we want to say assumption. That's an assumption you made. You said something, you didn't have evidence, you just said it was true. Now let's look at the adjective. We can have assumed. When you assumed something, you took it for granted. You just said, it's just true. Once again, there's no evidence. You just said, it's true. But if you can assume something, like you assumed I loved you, you just took it that I loved you, you didn't have evidence, and you didn't even care. That's what we mean by take for granted. Taken for granted means you don't care, you just say it's true, and I don't care about anything else. I'm not going to put the time or effort to even try to prove it. Okay? Another adjective meaning is assuming and unassuming. Assuming in this case is quite funny. If you use it here, it means sort of like arrogant, overconfident, in an assuming smile, because it's like, I know. But remember, it's without evidence. So you shouldn't really be assuming in this way. The other opposite, it's funny, is unassuming, which means common or normal. He had an unassuming smile, like it's average and common. Nothing special, nothing threatening. Threatening means make you feel afraid, right? The house had an unassuming appeal to it, a common or normal appeal, so you might like it. One thing we use in English to actually explain assume is, because it comes away, there is no connection with evidence, we usually say, don't assume, or you make an us, which is a donkey, an animal, or you make yourself stupid, you make an us out of you, that's you, the engVid viewer, and me. So don't assume. So if you're not too sure of this lesson, make sure you go back over it again and don't assume you understand it until you mastered it. Now let's look at presume. It looks very similar to assume. In fact, they both share in something truth, right? Somebody believes something is true. In this case, you assume without evidence. So you think it's true, but you haven't got any evidence to say it's true. In this case, it's interesting. You think it's true because of something, evidence you had from before. Okay? When I said here the sun will come up, I assumed it would. I had no evidence. I didn't care. On this one, I say to you, I presumed it would come up because it came up yesterday, it came up the day before, and the day before that, and the last 100 years it came up. Therefore, I presume, based on previous evidence. Now remember, evidence from yesterday, or proof, doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, but it gives you an idea it might, and that's why we use presume. In fact, in law, in Canada and the United States and Great Britain, we say you are presumed innocent. That means until proven guilty. We believe you are innocent based on evidence from prior cases, and that means before cases, you are innocent. Until we have something opposite to prove you are guilty. Okay? Presumed innocent. France is the exact opposite, by the way. You're presumed guilty until proven innocent. So don't think it's everywhere in the world, all right? Now, you'll notice how I explain that, and it comes here. So look, believe until contrary. Contrary is this fancy word that just means, contrary to belief. I can't spell English. I forgot the C-O-N, sorry. Contrary. It's a new English word. Welcome to engVid. Contrary, to the contrary. Okay? Yeah. So what happens is, as I said with the law, you are innocent until we see something opposite. The next one is, if this is true, and this is what happens, do you remember I gave the example about the sun? Yesterday, the day before, it kept coming up. So then because of that, I have strong evidence, so I believe what I say is right. This leads people to become overconfident, and in some cases arrogant. Because they have some knowledge from before, they think, now I know everything. So anything I say is right. And I can presume, which is to believe, based on experience from before, everything is true. Well, boys and girls, most of us know now that if you go past your country and go on the water, you don't fall off the edge of the earth. A lot of people presumed this before because ships weren't built very well, would go sailing and disappear. So they would say a giant monster at the end of the earth would eat people because we know from evidence they never come back. We know better now, right? But they were overconfident and arrogant, so they didn't even try to check if the facts were right. So be careful about presumption. Presumption, there we go. Presumption is the noun form of presume. Presume is the verb. And if we go down here, presuming or presumptuous, we'll notice these two words, which are adjectives to describe something, go right back up to arrogant and confident. Overconfident. I don't want to presume too much here, but I'm going to assume, I know I have no evidence right now, that this lesson was pretty good for you. We're going to do a quick recap, because I don't want you making any assumptions on your own that might be incorrect. And our unassuming worm friend, he's relaxed, so he's going to give me a minute or two to do this for you. All right? So what we want to remember is A for assume is away from evidence. There's no evidence to help you to prove it's true. So when you assume something, you say, I just assumed because nobody told me. I had no other evidence. I had to assume. You understand? Presume means before. So if you presume, you should be able to show someone some evidence that this is why you thought it would be true. Presume is formal, usually used in law or medicine, right? Where they have evidence and they can say, because of this and this, I presume this would be true. Assume is commonly used. In fact, 95% of the time, Canadians will say this and they won't say that, even though presume is more accurate. You can test your knowledge. You know where you're going to test it? Well, I want you to assume you're going to learn, right? And you're going to go to a special place called engVid, and you can assume you'll learn something, expect and believe, right? And then you'll start assuming the identity of an English speaker. Yeah? I presume from there, well, I hope I'm wrong, that you might start getting overconfident and arrogant. Don't do that, okay? Because if you do that and you presume too much, you might make a fool of yourself. See, that's going to believe up until something contrary happens, all right? So that was a quick overview. And I need you to go to www. Assuming you have a computer, right? Ing as in English, vid as in video.com, where me, my fantastic worm, and I did it again, man. I did it. No con, no com. Ah, assuming I can teach English, you could probably presume I would get these two right, right? Right. Anyway, you go to www.engvid.com, and then you can actually stop assuming and start presuming that you have mastered this language. Thanks, and I'm out. I'm going to work on .com and contrary.com, and I assume I'll learn it by the time I get back. .com and contrary, .com and contrary.